Among the people you met, of course, one of those was Martin Luther King Jr.
Yes.
So, could you talk
Yes.
talk with us about
Yes.
how you met and
Yes.
how your work together began to emerge?
Sure, absolutely. First time I ever laid eyes on Martin Luther King was in May of 1951. I'm a junior at Virginia Union. He has just finished Crozer Seminary and is driving back to Atlanta in May at the end of the school year at Crozer, and he's going to Boston University in the fall. Some of the fellows, many of the graduate students at Virginia Union at that time were very senior people because they'd been veterans, they'd come back, so they knew King and all of that. And so he had stopped on our campus for a visit. So we all crowded into one of the graduate students' suite. I must have been 40 of us in that little suite. And there stands this little short guy expounding, It's the first time I ever laid eyes on him. Many of them knew him. They had known each other from their affiliation at the National Baptist Convention. King's daddy was, I think Daddy King was treasurer at one time. And so King was well versed in the hierarchy of the conventions and all. So a lot of fellows knew him. He had stopped in Richmond to address a student interracial council. Those councils at that time in the South were the folks who would deign to get together and do it. So he was going to address them. So that's the first time I saw him. That was 1951. I didn't really meet King. I was, just in a general gathering there. I was just there. But I didn't meet King until about 59. I went on his board in the next year. Ironically, our years overlapped in Boston. There was some overlap in Boston. I went to Boston in 52 for my theological work. He had one more year at Boston University at that time. When Rosa Parks on December 1 stood up for everything that she believed in by sitting down, I think that was one of the most momentous moments in the life of in the struggle of freedom, for freedom. Here's this woman putting her life on the line. In fact, her husband never recovered from it. Mr. Parks never recovered from it. They were chased out of Montgomery after that, fugitives, so to speak, for a year or so. Finally, they had arrived in Detroit. They were at Hampton for a little bit on the move, Mrs. Parks, Rosa Parks, and then my wife and I worked with her later, her work with children. And some of the work we do now, we feel is somewhat of an extension from what we felt when we were working with her. When Martin Luther King reluctantly accepted the presidency of Improvement Association that Friday, after E.D. Nixon had given preachers a scolding. You remember that story? He had given the preachers a scolding. Nobody wanted to go front. King was a new preacher in town. Let this kid...
Tell us the story, because many people won't be familiar
Yeah,
with it.
that's right. Well, E.D. Nixon really was the godfather of that whole movement. Phil Randolph protege, working on a Porter, Pastor Carl Porter, and he had nurtured that whole thing. In fact, Rosa Parks was mentored by him, and she was kind of the key person in working with the youth division of NACP. So her work with young people started very early. But when she refused to give up her seat, she told this story, and she told us this story over and over again, what was going through her mind. She had been to Highlander Folk School just 2 weeks before that. So she was kind of being led through a kind of a preparatory period that was not, set, but that's the way it happened. And when it was clear that, because we know that she was not the first to challenge, and the community had not rallied before. Part of the reason they rallied for her was because of who she was, and some people make an issue about class distinction, other young people and all that, but I don't buy that at all. E.D. Nixon knew how to coalesce they've been trying to take that bus company on for a long time, as you know, and this seemed like just the perfect one. And so he was on the road when it happened, but he orchestrated the setting up of the boycott from the road. I don't know how they did it. They didn't have cell phones in those days and stuff like. I don't know how they did it, but they got that thing going. And the women, Joanne Robinson and the Women's Political Action Group, they started planning that thing right away, so that by the time Sunday came, they had all of those churches mobilized, so that the next day, the day of the boycott, December the 5th, the buses were empty. The buses were empty. And they realized that, no, we can't stop this thing now. So for 381 days, they carried it on. But it was E.D. Nixon who butted heads among the preachers. Those preachers were scared to death. He said, stop acting like boys. He said to the preachers, stop acting like boys at heaven. We need you all to be leaders. And it was beautiful. I love that story. If you got prophets scared, it's a question of whether you're going to get into prophetic action. And I'll be honest with you, brother. When you know what's at stake for your people, and you know who some of the people are who can make a difference, I have gotten to the place I don't mind making a nuisance of myself to make people do what we must do to save every child on the planet. That's my mantra now, saving every child on planet Earth. And I believe that we have a divine mandate that says that if you stand in the way of any child coming into their fulfillment, the kingdom and so forth, kingdom of love, if you stand in the way of any child, it's better that you were never born. I think that's pretty clear. So at least I can spread that word and make a nuisance of myself if possible, if necessary, on behalf of the children and their families. We must save every child, but we must save their families as well. If we can't save the family, save the children, but let's try to save them both. That's the mantra of my work right now.